listening to the Ball Talk podcast with me, Ryan Bailey. This podcast is brought to you by Adapt Athletic Performance and Therapy. Head over to Instagram and give them a follow at adapt_clinic. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to leave a like, share it with your friends, and hit that subscribe or follow button as well. Without further ado, let's get straight into the podcast. Just as I'm editing this, I've noticed that there's a slight bit of a noise in the background of Derek's microphone that picks it up from time to time in the podcast. I could have taken it out, but it would have got rid of a lot of good stories from the podcast. So you might have to bear with that. Unfortunately, it will come and go, but it's not too bad. It's gone for the majority of the podcast. So, folks, you're all very welcome to episode number 50 of the Ball Talk podcast. As always, brought to you by Adapt Athletic Performance and Therapy. And before I introduce my guest today, I said it on my Instagram story the other day that I would explain why there was no podcast last week. Unfortunately, I tested positive for COVID-19 last week, so that was the absence of the podcast down to that. But we're back on the mend now, and today I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by Derek Brazil. And Derek, I'll give the floor to you for the next 30 seconds to a minute to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Derek Brazil from Dublin. I played professional football for Manchester United, Cardiff City, Newport County, representing my country at under 15, 17s, 18s, 19s, 23s, and B international. So I'm currently retired, but still available for charity games and stuff. So I often play them with Man United and Cardiff City. So I'm still here after all this pandemic, still going strong.
Brilliant stuff, Derek. So come here, as I said to you before we started recording, should I say, the main topic of today's podcast will be your journey to and your time at Manchester United. And being a Manchester United fan, that's something that really interests me. And let's go back to the very start. Young Derek Brazil growing up in Dublin. Was sport something that was, almost a first in your family? Was your family very involved in sport?
Well, I'm the oldest of five, so I was the first one, and my dad actually boxed for Ireland. He could have actually gone to the Tokyo Olympics, but he decided to concentrate on football. So he was playing with Shamrock Rovers. My dad, he's Mick Brazil, people knew him as, and he went to Blackburn for a trial at 17, and he went over there for a month, and they wanted to sign him, but he got so homesick he missed my ma. So he came back. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So he came back, and then obviously I was born. So I was always kind of interested in it, but I really only started playing sport. I played Gaelic football from the age of 10 till I was 13. So I didn't actually play football at all. So Gaelic football was my love, and I used to think I used to play for Erin's Oil in Dublin. A very good club, but I got to about 30, just late 13, and my dad said to me, "Why don't you give football a try?" So I did. So he played me. I was quite tall then. He played me in an under 17s team. So I played on the left wing, so I wouldn't get kicked or anything, and got the bug for it, enjoyed it. And so under 14s, I went to Belvedere. I don't know if you know Belvedere. They're a big club in Dublin. They've had players from like Curtis Fleming, Wes Houlihan, people like that. So I went there as a striker, and under 14s I scored 30 goals. I hated it. I know that sounds really, people would say that's really Irish, that is, but I didn't enjoy playing with my back to goal. Okay. So I said I want to play centre half. He said, "No, we've already got centre halves." So I said, "Well, I don't want to stay." So I left them after a year, which is quite controversial, because when you go to Belvedere, no one leaves Belvedere. Do you know what I mean? The only reason you leave there is to go to an English club. And I went to my local team in Finglas called Rivermount Boys. So I played centre half with them. And then under 15s, my first year as a centre half, I got chosen for the under 15 Ireland team.
Okay.
So there was a couple of games. We played Northern Ireland, and we played I can't remember the other team. But I really enjoyed that buzz of it. And then a lot of the boys at 15 were in, some of them were playing in England teams, and I wasn't. So that kind of got me noticed because I was playing for a local team. And then again, I played on the 16s, on the 17s. And then at 17, West Ham asked me to come on trial for a month, which I did. And, I went there. But after a month, the manager said to me, "You're not good enough. You need to go back home and get a job in Dublin."
Right, okay.
So this was John Lyle. And, I was training with people like Trevor Brookin and Billy Bonds and, people like that, and Frank McAvenny. And it was quite overawing. And Paul Ince was there at the time. That's when I first met Paul Ince at West Ham. He was a 17-year-old. So I went home in December, played for Ireland a couple of times again, and in the under-18s, and then Man United, Tottenham, Chelsea, and Man City said they wanted to sign me. No trial. So I went to these clubs, and the last club I went to was Man United, and I actually played. They wanted me to sign, but Ireland were actually playing over there at the time. So I played for Ireland at the Cliff against Man United's select team. And I was marking Frank Stapleton. Frank was a hero of mine. Even though I didn't play football, I was an Arsenal supporter from an early age. And I had pictures of Frank, Liam Brady, Dave O'Leary all on my wall. And I was marking Frank, and Frank scored a hat-trick against me. So I was a bit devastated. But when we went upstairs, with my dad and Ron Atkinson, and Ron said, "Look, we'd like to sign him on a 3-year contract." And I sat there and I said, "I don't really understand why." He said, "Well, look," I said, "Frank scored a hat-trick against me." He went, "He could have scored 10. So the amount of tackles you made on him, and Frank was very complimentary about you after the game. He said, "So I have no worries about that." So that's how I got to sign for Man United for Ron Atkinson, who was like such a larger-than-life character. I signed a 3.5-year contract at the age of 17. So
brilliant.
It was when you think about it, I say to kids now who I teach, I didn't start playing football until I was 14. And it's basically 3.5 years I, started my dream type of thing,
Yeah, it's an interesting one, that, because you look at it now and there's, for the majority of young lads to get into a United team or a City team, they're at the academy from the age of 10 or 11.
Yeah.
Whereas you didn't start until the age of 13, and you go back to the 80s and to the 90s as well. It's a lot harder to get a trial in England if you're from Ireland.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, the academies weren't around when I was that age. You're talking 1986 now. You're going back to, and there was no academies. They just had lots of scouts going out and watching players play for their local team. It was only when they got to say, 15 or 16 that they'd probably bring you into the club regularly. So it was quite hard to get a trial because, the likes of Man United and Man City and all the clubs, they probably had one scout in Ireland. So for example, Man United probably had one scout in Southern Ireland and one scout in Northern Ireland. So there'd be a lot of kids. I mean, I played in a team in Rivermount and Belvedere. There was players in that team better than me. They were better players than me, but they didn't have the same dedication and belief that I probably had.
Yeah.
So when a scout sees you and invites you to come over, it's a big thing. I mean, when I went to West Ham at 17, I'd never been on a plane.
Yeah.
My daughter's 10 now, and she's been on a plane like 50 times.
Yeah.
I got to 17 before. I mean, we never went on holiday anywhere. We just got to Butlins and stuff with the family. Yeah. So it's quite scary. And homesickness when you get there is it's a big part why a lot of lads from Ireland have gone over there, and literally you see them come back after a year. So homesickness is a killer, really. In fact, I'm feeling a little bit homesick now because I haven't seen my mum, dad, or my family in Dublin for like 12, 13 months now because of this whole COVID thing. Doing my head in.
I know it is. It's a balls, to say the least. Just looking on the trials, as you said, you listed out you have a list of clubs there that you went on trial with. Did you find as the trials went on, you were kind of settling in a bit more to the scenario of a trial, if you get me? If you're playing a trial game and you're kind of you're improving yourself as you go along until the trial at United comes up.
Well, the month at West Ham was really interesting because I went there Eamon Dolan was there. And Pat Dolan, his brother, was at Arsenal. So I stayed with the Dolans. Lovely family. But I trained with the first team then. So I've gone from training with my local team and obviously playing with Ireland now and again to training with the likes of Frank McAvenny and these top players. And I found it really difficult to try and get into sync with it. Whereas that wouldn't happen now. You go and try, you can go train with the first team. You'd probably be with the youth team or the reserves. So I never got a chance to do that. And when I came back home after a month, I was quite disappointed. And a lot of the lads in my football team would say, well, if he's the best player in our team and he can't make it, what chance have we? But I knuckled down, and within 3 months, I played for Ireland a couple of times. And the difference between the West Ham one and say, Chelsea, Tottenham, Man City and Man United is that they didn't want me to come on trial. They wanted me to come for 3 days to have a look at the club. So they wanted to sign me. So the pressure was off me a little bit.
Yeah.
So I didn't really feel any pressure going there because I knew one of them wanted me to sign. It was just a case of which one I picked. And my dad's been a Man United supporter for years, and not that influenced me in any way. It was that out of the 4 clubs I went to, there was a big, strong Irish connection at Man United.
Yeah.
You had the likes of Paul McGrath, Norman Whiteside, Joe Hanrahan was there, Martin Russell, Kevin Moran. So it was they kind of made me feel welcome, and it just felt right. It just felt right it did, because I ended up being there for 6 years as a player. So I learned a lot of things at United, on and off the pitch.
Yeah.
Those names I've mentioned.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So your early memories of being at United as well, walking in and as you said, you mentioned Frank Stapleton earlier, and a fella that you have the posters up on your wall, and all of a sudden maybe you're sat beside him in the dressing room, or you're marking him in a game. How does that transition, and as your early memories of United, I'm sure that one rests highly with you.
It was. Obviously I used to go and watch Ireland play when the likes of Paul McGrath was playing, and obviously Kevin and Frank in particular as well, but I think after about a week of being there, everyone just makes you feel so relaxed, and you kind of, it was a case of trying, okay, I've signed now. What was good for me was I signed in the March, so I was probably only there for 3 months, and then it was summer holidays, so I ended up coming back home for about 5 weeks again.
Okay.
So that kind of was a nice break, rather than being there all season and then having to come home. I was there from March till say, May. So we had June off, and then we were back again. So I had the whole of June back in Ireland, where I could be with my family and work things out in my head. But being with Frank's great, because the funny thing is, having pictures of Frank on my wall to then go into playing with him. And then about 10 years ago, I was playing in a Man United Legends game. Okay. Actually we were up in Ballybuffet.
Right.
So we were playing there, and the game was in the evening, and I happened to be rooming with Frank. So Frank is so professional. He said, right, let's have a lunch, and we're having a nap. We're having a nap now because it's a big game tonight and all that. I'm thinking, Frank, come on, I just want to go out and have a bit of a walk. So he's in a single bed, I'm in a single bed. I'm lying there, and I went, Frank? He went, yeah. He said, I can't get to sleep. He said, why? I said, well, about 20 odd years ago, I said, I used to have posters of you on my wall. I said, now, 20 odd years later, I'm sleeping in the same room as you. Do you think that's mad? And he went, I can't say what he said, but he said, go to sleep. But I just I rang me dad then. I said, Dad, yeah, the game's tonight. I've left you 2 tickets. Yeah. He goes, who your roommate? I went, Frank. He went, put him on. So I put Frank on the phone to me dad. And my dad knew Frank's dad as well, Mick Stapleton. Yeah. And I fell asleep then. So my dad was on the phone talking to Frank, and Frank literally just put the phone down afterwards. So weird it is how things, I know I'm diverting, but it's weird how things go along.
Yeah.
But I think once you're in, they become, because you train every day with them, so you still have that massive respect for them, but you see him more as a teammate, as a friend, which I'm honoured to say, you know.
And the culture around it's it's even different in Gaelic football. Never mind in football in terms of playing with United at a professional level. The culture around it and team bonding, so to say, and getting to know lads better. And you mentioned a few Irish lads there. I'm sure they dragged you into a pub and you were made feel very welcome.
Well, you think, I mean, I think the first time I got into trouble was when I was about 18. So I'd settled in, I'd been there a while, and you had the usual crew. You had Brian Robson, you had Norman, Paul. Frank wouldn't come. So you'd have Norman, Paul, Brian Robson, and a few others. So they drag you along, like, now you have but before you know it, it's like very late, and and they've got the day off tomorrow, but you're in. So, but the Irish boys were very protective of me. The likes of, Paul McGrath for me is like probably one of the best players Ireland has ever produced. And was brilliant at United, absolutely brilliant. And I think once Ferguson came in, it changed the whole thing, because when Ron Atkinson was there, it was very easy going. Ron would give the boys 2 or 3 days off to go on the lash, and they would go on the lash for 3 days. But they were so fit and they could do it. But then when Fergie came in, he changed everything. How you came to training, how you dressed, how your hair was, drinking. He got to know every pub landlord, so he'd find out if if anyone was there. He'd ring up, the landlord would ring up and say, "There's 2 of your boys in here." No problem. Fergie, sort a couple of tickets out for the landlord in the pub. So he was very clever, Fergie. So I think that drinking culture kind of, Paul and Norman, suffered the wrath of Fergie when he got rid of them. Robbo probably would have done as well, but I think with Brian Robson, I think Fergie realised that he was such an iconic player for Man United, and he was captain of England, so he's had a few warnings, Robbo, and then I think he's decided to keep him. But a great man, Fergie, a great man.
Yeah, the transition in the club, like, it's such an important part of history in football. The change from Ron Atkinson to Alex Ferguson, and Alex Ferguson coming in, and we've seen it in managers in United in the last few years, that if Fergie is treated the same as Mourinho, as a Moyes, and as Solskjaer, probably up until a few weeks ago, he probably would have been gone after a year, maybe, if he got the second year, if he was lucky.
Yeah.
That transition and the style of football, you mentioned the drinking culture around the club, but the style of football and everything, how did you find that change yourself?
Under Ferguson, it was a lot more, the training was more intense. Some days we'd go out with Ron, and it'd be like, have a little box, a bit of keep ball, 5-a-sides, bit of shooting, that was it. But with Fergie, I found it was more, the coaches he brought, the coaches he had there, like Eric Harrison, the training was more intense. It was more based on fitness as well, and getting players really, really fit and getting to a system of actually playing football. Ron liked to play, but Ron would want you to get the ball. When you watch teams now and they get the ball, literally, keeper has it and they're on the 6-yard box, Ron was very similar to that. He wanted to play like that, but you get caught in possession, it'd be a nightmare. But Fergie was more about teamwork, hard work, and everyone putting a shift in. And if you weren't playing well, if you were actually running about and trying to do it well, he always respected that. But he changed it all, really, in terms of fitness, how players, he even took us to, especially us youngsters, he came and took us to Old Trafford, to the museum, personally himself, and showed us all around. He said, this is what you have to try and achieve. If you achieve a small bit of what is in this museum, then you'll do well. But he was different, put it that way, when he came in. He ruffled a few feathers, and I had a few bollockings off him, but also he put his arm around me quite a lot as well. There was times when I was not performing in training, and he said, "What's up?" I said, "Oh, I'm all right." He said, "When's the last time you went home?" I said, "Probably about 3 months ago." He said, "Right, I booked a flight for you Friday. come back Tuesday, ready for a game on the Wednesday, for the reserve team. So he was very good in that respect. That he was like a father figure to a lot of players.
Was there any one standout memory that you have or interaction with Alex Ferguson himself? You can go positive or negative in this one as well.
There's a few I can't say because it's like it's near the bone type of thing. But probably the best thing I can say is when I wasn't at Man United, when I met him about 6 years ago. Now I hadn't seen him since I left in '93, so 2003, 10. So about 15 years later, because basically I went to Cardiff on loan for 3 months, but after a month Cardiff signed me, so I never even got back to go to Old Trafford to pick my stuff up. And then Cardiff City were playing Man United, at Cardiff City, and I was working as an ambassador for Cardiff City. So someone said to me, "Your old boss is in the directors' lounge." So who? They went, "Sir Alex." So I haven't seen him for 15 years. I wonder if he recognised me. So I went in, and as soon as I went in, he was sat on a table with Bobby Charlton and some other directors and stuff like that. And as soon as I came in, he stood up and he shook my hand and gave me a hug. And it was like, wow. He said, "Sit down there." So I sat down. He said, "How are you doing?" I said, "I'm doing well." He said, "Oh, good." He said, "How long have you been working here?" I said, "About 2 months now." So he said, "This club still owes money for you." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, they paid us 90 grand for you. And when you made 100 appearances, it was supposed to be another 30 grand. He said, we never had it." I said, "Well, boss," I said, this Cardiff City has had so many owners, like you'd have to chase them." And this is the thing that got me with it. He said, "So, how's the family?" I said, "Oh God," I said, "I got a little girl now." He said, how's Mick and Evelyn back in Dublin?" And I sat there like that. I went, "How has he remembered my man and dad's names?" I went, "Yeah, they're good. He said, "Now tell me, is your dad still taxiing?" Honest to God, I was blown away, and I went,
"Brilliant."
"He is actually, yeah." And I had a photograph with him, and I come away and I thought, I spoke to a few other lads who around my era who bumped into him, and I told them the story, and they said he knew our parents' names as well and what they did. Now, to me, that says a lot about a manager, a man, a tactician, that he can remember some. I mean, fair enough. You might know Steve Bruce's parents. You might know Brian Robson's or any of the big name players, but I only played twice for him in the first team. And the rest, I was captain of the reserves. But I can't even remember people I worked with 3 weeks ago, let alone their parents. I mean, that says a lot about a man in terms of his knowledge and his caring, that he would remember my man and dad's name and what my dad did, just like that. That's uncanny, really.
Yeah.
So, but he was, my time at United, he was brilliant with, because he gave me my debut. He was constantly pushing me. And, I had my fallouts with him because he tried to make me go to Wrexham on loan. He tried to make me go to Shrewsbury on loan. I said I didn't want to go. He said, "Right, you're never playing for this club again." So I'd leave the room. He'd have me back in the reserves on the weekend as captain. So I think he liked if you stood up to him, but only in a way of your belief. Because I thought it was better than those clubs that he was trying to get me to. Yeah. I think he liked that type of thing. But an amazing bloke, and loved my time with him. I do wonder sometimes if Ron had been there longer, how would have, if Ron had been successful there and stayed for 3 or 4 years, how it would have worked out for me, as a person and as a player. But I suppose if you look like that, you'd look over everything, wouldn't you? So
that's true, yeah. And as your time as captain of the reserves team, in the particular period of the club, the late 80s, the early 90s, there's a lot of new faces coming in. As you said, the change in the management brings in new players, but there's a certain group of players coming up as well at the time, a group of youngsters coming up in United's time, and that you would have played with and got to see grow in the club.
Yeah, well, that was obviously the class of '92, wasn't it? I mean, Giggsy had already Ryan Giggs had already broken into the first team anyway. And he was 17 years, phenomenal talent. But the likes of like the two Nevilles and Beckham and Scholes and they were. We used to go and watch them play. So we were, say, in our 20s, 21 maybe. We'd go and watch them play in their, say, the A team or the B team, because they were that good. And often we would play like a practice match against them, and they would just tear us apart. They were so it was like a freak group of players. You know, you had like Scholes, who at that time played as a centre forward, but would drop off into a 10, and his vision was different class. I mean, Nicky Butt was hard as nails for a young kid. The two Nevilles were, I mean, Gary Neville was the same as he is now, just efficient. You know, everything he does is just efficient. He never tried anything different. And obviously Bex was like, just the ball at his feet. He was only like a little skinny little thing, but the ball at his feet, his passing range and his awareness was just. And I kind of, as a group of lads, there was about, say, 5 or 6 of us who were apparently, like, when we broke through, we were called Fergie's fledglings, as they call it. But we knew that they were gonna jump past us in the pecking order. So that's when, around the age of 20, 21, you start thinking, right, I need to get out of here, because these kids are going to come past us, you know, and we're going to just be waste. And as a player, you know when players are coming through, when it's time to go. And it's particularly at Man United, where those type of players were better than the ones even in the first team. Never mind the ones who were on the fringe of the first team or the reserves. They were better than some of the players in the actual first team.
Yeah.
And Fergie knew that, and that's why he put them in straight away. No messing about. So.
You said there you spoke very highly of Ryan Giggs, first off. Can you remember the first time you saw Giggs on the ball, or even Beckham or any of them?
Well, Beckham in particular, I remember watching him, and they used to take the mick out of him because of his squeaky voice from London. And I completely forgot, because sometimes you forget stuff that you generally do day to day. So it was about 3 years ago, a friend of mine took his dad to watch Man United against Galatasaray at Old Trafford. And he took him in for the food and all that, and the pre-match. And he rang me, he said, I said, it's great here. So I know it's great, innit? I said, he said, David Beckham's dad's over there. I said, that's Ted. His name's Ted. Go and see him. Tell him I said hello. So my mate Nobby was saying, no way, I don't believe you. Don't wind me up. I said, go over to Ted and say, tell him I said hello. So Nobby went over, spoke to him, and then he rang me up then. He said, you ain't joking. He does know you. I said, yeah. I said, did you give my regards? I said, yeah. He said, so what'd you say to him? He said, oh, I'm from South Wales, and my mate used to play for Man United. And Ted Beckham said to him, what's his name? And he said, Derek Brazil. He went, great lad. He looked after my son. And it was only when he said that to me, it come back to me that when Bex was a kid, if you imagine going back in years' time, like, as Irish people, they would just take the mick out of you. Do you know what I mean? You'd have English players and all that. They just take the mick out of Irish people for the usual stuff we get taken the mick out of.
Yeah. Same
with Bex. Bex was from London with a squeaky voice. And I remember, like, a few times protecting him and saying, look, leave him alone. You know, don't cut that out and all that. Stop bullying him. Just let him get on with it and all that. But I completely forgot about this. But David had obviously gone back and told his dad. And his dad had remembered that all this time. So that was like a memory that had gone from me. With Ryan Giggs, I remember playing with him in the A team, which is just below the reserves. And I think he scored 4 goals in the first half. He was playing centre forward at the time. He scored 4 goals in literally 23 minutes or something. And as a defender, you're thinking, oh, great, this is great. You know, 23 minutes, the game's over now. But he was lightning, absolutely lightning. And he had no fear. He literally had no fear on the ball. If people would kick him, he'd just skip past them. And he was quite a confident boy as well, off the field. And, you know, he literally went straight into the first team at 17. I think he made his debut was against Man City or somebody, I can't remember. But he was just, different. He was one of those players that only comes around once in a lifetime, really.
Yeah.
And he's an excellent player.
In leaving the club, as you said, you had what was it, 5-6 years stint at the club?
Yeah, initially I signed a 3.5-year contract to take me up to 20, just over 20, and then Fergie offered me another 2.5-year contract. So that was quite good. But then I was 22, 23. I went to Swansea on loan for 3 months. They wanted to sign me, but they couldn't afford the fee. So I came back to United for a year. Then I went to Cardiff, and that was it, really. So, I mean, when I look back at my time at Man United, there's loads of things I would change, but then there's loads of things I wouldn't change.
Mm.
I mean, the things I'd probably change would probably be me, how I looked at it and how I probably didn't push myself as hard as I would. But I was determined not to come back to Ireland because I'd seen people go from Ireland, people slightly older than me, go to England and literally come home after a year, or even after 4 years, they went, go back to the safety of going back to play for Shelburne or Pats or something like that. But I wanted to actually stay here as long as I could, which I did, and obviously still am. So
yeah, was it something that maybe was in the back of your mind, the fact that you're, as you said, now obviously it worked out for the best because your dad came home and met your mum, but was it in the back of your mind that, my dad, he came back, I have to stay here now and prove myself?
Yeah, it was actually kind of. I've never actually thought of it like that, but kind of, yeah. It was a case of, but then my dad would always say to me as well, look, he said, you go and do what I didn't do. And my family, and still are, like, my dad's my hero, and he's always been the one to push me and say to me, look, just whatever makes you happy, do it. And it was kind of, but it was also something myself that I think, I thought if I'd come back to Ireland at the age of 30, say, to me, it would have been a failure because I'd gone away at 17, and it was like, okay, I mean, in terms of at 17, I had the world at my feet. Within 10 years, at the age of 27, I had to retire from full-time football. So that in those 10 years, I crammed a lot in. So,
yeah,
in many ways, but I think it's such a short career. But I wouldn't change anything of it, really. I love my time at Man United. I say I still play with Man United legends, and we have various people. I mean, the last game we played was obviously before the pandemic.
Mm.
We went to Bulgaria, and we had Lee Sharp, we had Sammy McElroy. So this is the team now. Imagine this team from all different eras. You had Nick Culkin was the goalkeeper. You had Lee Martin, David May, Wes Brown, me, Russell Beardsmore, Sammy McElroy, Keith Gillespie, Lee Sharp, Danny Webber, Frank Stapleton, and Andy Ritchie. So
brilliant.
You look at that team of different eras.
Yeah.
So it was amazing, obviously, to meet with these players. So, and it's great. And obviously we've missed a few, and I'm hoping after this we get back again to doing it as well, because it's great to see. Yeah. I mean, people like Sammy McElroy. I'd never met Sammy McElroy before I was playing for the Legends, but what an absolute diamond of a bloke, And Frank, who still plays with us, still tells me off. Still tells me what to do. So I still have that fear around Frank still.
Yeah, it's probably just a grudge that he didn't get his night's sleep on the phone to your dad.
Yeah, he probably did. I fell asleep before him.
Derek, look, I have to say I thoroughly enjoyed that, and thanks a million for coming onto the podcast. And as I said,
pleasure.
We'll have to do another one. No, personally, I try to get the second time round when people on a podcast will try to meet up face to face. With the pandemic, that's
I'd love a night out in Sligo. I'd love a night out in Sligo. It'd be great. I thought you're from Sligo.
Sligo's right, yeah. I'm in Limerick at the moment in college, but I do be up and down the whole time.
Oh, okay. See, I can't. The first time I can fly, I'm flying back to Ireland, see the family, but also because my brother Theo, he's built a bar in his shed, and he keeps sending me videos of it. I'm like, okay, the first time's great, but don't keep doing it.
Yeah.
Winding me up now. So, but no, it's honestly it's great. Thank you so much for getting in touch with me, and it's always great to talk about Man United, particularly a Man United supporter as well.